I'm standing in a courthouse parking lot watching strangers bid on my house. 15,000 going once. The auctioneer's voice echoes off the concrete. How did I get here? My HOA president Karen Whitmore decided that the windows she personally approved were suddenly illegal. She thought she could destroy my life over home improvements I'd written permission for. But Karen made one fatal mistake. She didn't know I document everything. Every lie, every threat, every violation notice from those miserable community center meetings. Fast forward 5 years, I'm holding a $75,000 check. Guess whose signature is on it? That's right, Karen Whitmore herself. She had absolutely no idea what she'd started when she messed with the wrong electrician. So, what would you do if your HOA tried to steal your house over approved renovations? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Let's see how far this story spreads. My name's Marcus Hendricks, 52 years old, union electrician, and I thought I understood power. Turns out I knew nothing about the kind of power that comes with a clipboard and a bad attitude. After my divorce, I needed somewhere safe for Emma's weekend visits. My 16-year-old daughter was already dealing with enough chaos. I wanted stability. Willowbrook Estates looked perfect. Quiet streets, kids on bikes, the smell of barbecue drifting from backyards on summer evenings. The house needed work, but that's my specialty. Those original 1973 windows were bleeding money every winter. Single-pane aluminum frames that basically invited the cold inside. I researched replacements for months, double-pane vinyl, energy-efficient, historically appropriate style. Here's where I made my first mistake. I trusted the system. I submitted my architectural request like a good homeowner. Photos, specifications, contractor credentials, the whole package. The HOA had 30 days to respond. On day 28, I got my approval letter. Request approved for installation. Clear as daylight, signed by the architectural committee. Professional installation, city permits, inspector approval, everything by the book. Those windows looked fantastic and cut my heating bill in half. For exactly 14 days, I thought I'd won the homeowner lottery. Then Karen Whitmore decided to destroy my life. Karen was our HOA president, and she ran Willowbrook like her personal dictatorship. Real estate agent by trade, control freak by nature. Picture someone who'd weaponize a homeowners association because she enjoyed watching people squirm. Blonde bob like a helmet, leather portfolio like a shield, smile that could freeze hell. I was flipping burgers for Emma when my phone exploded. Mr. Hendricks, your unauthorized modifications are unacceptable. Karen, I have written approval. Approval was conditional pending final board review. I stared at my letter. No conditions anywhere. Where does it say that? Click. Deadline. Tuesday night, I walked into that community center with my approval letter and righteous confidence. Bad move. The place smelled like industrial coffee and crushed dreams. Karen sat behind a folding table like she was presiding over war crimes trials. Your window installation violates community standards, she announced, sliding a violation notice toward me like a death sentence. I held up my approval. You already said yes. Approval doesn't guarantee compliance. Her pen scratched across another form with the sound of bureaucratic revenge. $500 fine. 30 days to pay. $500 for following their rules? I looked around at my neighbors. Every face turned away. The silence in that room was deafening. That's when it hit me. Karen wasn't enforcing rules. She was making examples. The violation notice came with a threat buried in legal language. Fines double monthly until compliance. I dug through my HOA paperwork that night, tracing the financial nightmare Karen had just unleashed. Month 1, $500. Month 2, $1,000. Month 3, $2,000. My post-divorce budget couldn't survive this math. Lawyers wanted $5,000 up front just to read the case. I was looking at financial suicide either way. Pay Karen's escalating ransom or pay attorneys to fight her. But here's what Karen didn't know about electricians. We troubleshoot for a living. When a circuit shorts, we trace every wire until we find the problem. And I was about to discover that Karen Whitmore had been shorting this entire neighborhood. The real kicker? While researching my options, I drove around Willowbrook counting identical window replacements. 47 houses with the exact same vinyl windows I'd installed. 47 neighbors who'd never received violation notices. Karen wasn't enforcing community standards. She was running a protection racket, and I'd just become her newest target. The question was, what made me different from those other 47 homeowners? I was about to find out, and the answer would change everything. Karen's revenge came swift and brutal. 2 weeks after embarrassing her at that community meeting, I found a certified letter waiting like a venomous snake in my mailbox. Property lien notice for $2,000. My hands actually shook reading the breakdown. The original $500 fine had somehow mutated into a financial monster. Late fees, administrative costs, enforcement expenses. Karen had weaponized bureaucracy itself, but the real knife twist was buried in paragraph 3. Failure to satisfy lien may result in foreclosure proceedings. Foreclosure. Over windows she'd personally approved. I called Janet Bennett that evening, my 73-year-old neighbor who kept the most beautiful garden in Willowbrook. Her voice trembled when she answered, and I knew Karen had gotten to her too. "Oh, Marcus, I was hoping you'd call. Karen stopped by yesterday asking questions about your situation. Whether you seemed financially stable, whether Emma visits regularly, whether you maintain your property." Janet's pause stretched like a held breath. "She's building a case against you." Then came the revelation that changed everything. She did the same thing to me last year. Said my garden gnomes violated aesthetic standards. I'm 73 years old, Marcus. I moved the gnomes rather than fight. After hanging up, I spent the entire night researching Ohio property law on my laptop, the blue screen burning my tired eyes. That's when I stumbled across something that made me sit up straight. Back in electrical school, our instructor always said, know the code before you run the wire. Turned out HOA liens follow the same principle. You better know the legal requirements before you file the paperwork. Ohio law was crystal clear. HOA liens require proper legal notice with a 30-day cure period. Karen had skipped straight to the lien filing. Her entire threat was built on quicksand, and she was betting I wouldn't know the difference. The next morning, I drove to the county recorder's office basement. The place smelled like decades of moldering paperwork and crushed dreams. But buried in those files, I found Karen's fatal error. Her lien was missing 3 required legal documents. She'd cut corners because she assumed a blue-collar electrician wouldn't understand property law. Wrong assumption. I photocopied everything, filed my formal challenge, and walked out with my first legal victory buzzing through my veins like good voltage. But Karen was nowhere near finished. She called an emergency board meeting to clarify window policies. When I arrived at the community center, the air itself felt different, charged with Karen's desperation and that eternally burnt coffee smell. The board has determined that previous approvals were issued in error, she announced, reading from a script. All non-conforming windows must be replaced within 60 days. I stood up, my work boots loud on the linoleum. You can't retroactively change approvals, Karen. That's breach of contract. Mr. Hendricks, you're out of order. No, you're out of line. I held up my research like a winning lottery ticket. Your lien is invalid. You never provided proper legal notice under state law. Karen's face cycled through white, then red, then something approaching purple. This meeting is adjourned. But the damage was done. I'd humiliated her in front of the remaining board members, and Karen Whitmore collected grudges like some people collect stamps. The retaliation came fast. A collections agency started calling, Debt Recovery Solutions, some outfit from Columbus that made their living terrorizing homeowners. Mr. Hendricks, you owe $2,400. We can garnish wages and seize bank accounts. That lien is invalid. I filed a legal challenge. Our client says otherwise. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. Emma noticed during her weekend visit her 16-year-old eyes too perceptive for comfort. Dad, you look exhausted. What's wrong? How do you explain that the neighborhood bully is trying to steal your house? I pulled her into a hug instead. Just some boring adult stuff, sweetheart. That's when I started my documentation obsession. I converted the spare bedroom into a command center, timeline covering one wall, copies of every document, photos of windows throughout the neighborhood. If Karen wanted to play games, I'd learn the rules better than she knew them. The breakthrough came when I started mapping her enforcement patterns. 47 houses with identical windows, but the violations followed a disturbing pattern. Every targeted homeowner was either a renter, minority, or working class like me. Karen's country club friends got friendly reminders for identical violations. I was staring at systematic discrimination disguised as community standards. Then Karen dropped her nuclear option, an expensive HOA attorney from Columbus. His first letter arrived on letterhead that probably cost more than my monthly electric bill. Demand for immediate compliance and payment of all outstanding fines, now totaling $3,600. Karen was doubling down, betting financial pressure would break me. She had no idea she was teaching an electrician how to trace the biggest short circuit in neighborhood history. Karen's expensive Columbus attorney didn't believe in subtle threats. His letter arrived on cream-colored letterhead that probably cost more per sheet than I made per hour. Notice of intent to foreclose. Your client has 30 days to satisfy all outstanding obligations or face sheriff's sale. Sheriff's sale. The words hit me like touching a live wire without gloves. That weekend, I grabbed my measuring tape and camera for the most important electrical job of my life. Except instead of tracing circuits, I was documenting discrimination. House by house, window by window, I photographed every vinyl replacement in Willowbrook Estates. The smell of autumn leaves crunched under my boots as I walked streets I thought I knew. What I discovered made my stomach turn. 47 houses with identical windows to mine. Mrs. Patterson on Elm Street, married to the bank president, had the exact same brand, same style, installed the same month as mine. Not only did she avoid violations, but the HOA meeting minutes actually praised her community-minded improvements. 3 blocks away, Carlos Martinez got hammered with fines for identical windows. His crime? Being a mechanic who rented instead of owned. Karen's violation notice called his windows inconsistent with neighborhood aesthetic standards. Same windows, different treatment. The pattern was crystal clear. Back home, my spare bedroom transformed into something between a detective's evidence room and an electrician's troubleshooting station. Photos covered every wall, connected with colored string to a neighborhood map. Blue pins for Karen's friends who got warnings. Red pins for people like me who got fines. The red pins told a story that made my hands shake. Tuesday evening, Janet Bennett called in a whisper. "Marcus, I found something you need to see. Can you come over quietly?" Janet's kitchen smelled like jasmine tea and decades of careful silence. She handed me a manila folder with trembling fingers, her eyes darting toward the windows like Karen might be watching. "I saved everything from my garden gnome fight last year. I thought maybe someday—" Her voice trailed off. "Someone braver than me might need this." Inside that folder was dynamite disguised as paperwork. Email exchanges between Karen and board members that would make a civil rights lawyer's heart sing. One email stopped my breathing. "We need to be strategic about enforcement. Target renters and blue-collar types first. They're less likely to have legal resources to fight back." Legal resources. Karen had profiled me from day one, betting a divorced electrician couldn't afford justice. "Janet, why didn't you fight this? This is smoking gun discrimination evidence." Her weathered hands smoothed the folder closed. "Because I'm a 73-year-old Chinese widow, and Karen Whitmore runs this place like her personal empire. Who would have believed me?" That night, I researched fair housing law until my eyes burned from screen glare. Turns out selective HOA enforcement based on race or economic status violates federal law, not just HOA rules, but actual crimes with real penalties. Karen wasn't just being a neighborhood tyrant. She was running an illegal discrimination scheme. The next morning, I called Ohio Legal Aid with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The intake specialist's voice perked up when I described my evidence collection. "Sir, if you can document systematic patterns, this becomes a federal fair housing case. How much documentation do you have?" 3 boxes full, with photos and timelines going back 5 years. "Hold everything. Don't talk to anyone. We're assigning an attorney immediately."
It will be the
Sarah Martinez met me 2 days later in a conference room that smelled like fresh coffee and possibility. She spread my photos across the table like a winning poker hand, her eyes lighting up with each piece of evidence. "Marcus, this is textbook housing discrimination. Selective enforcement, economic profiling, racial targeting. Karen violated about 6 federal laws." Sarah leaned forward, tapping the timeline I'd created. "She made one fatal mistake picking an electrician to bully." "What's that?" "Electricians know how to trace problems to their source. Most people see individual violations. You documented the entire corrupt system." But Karen wasn't surrendering. Her attorney filed for expedited foreclosure, claiming I posed imminent community risk. The emergency hearing was scheduled for Friday, 4 days away. Emma found me Thursday night surrounded by legal briefs and cold coffee, preparing for the fight of our lives. "Dad, you look terrified. Is someone really trying to steal our house?" I pulled her close, breathing in her strawberry shampoo. "Remember when that kid Tyler kept stealing your lunch money until you finally told the principal?" "Yeah, and he got suspended." Sometimes bullies don't stop until someone forces them to stop. Karen's been stealing people's lunch money for years through these fake violations. Tomorrow, I'm telling the principal. Emma squeezed my hand. Good. Tyler needed that lesson too. Friday morning arrived cold and gray. Walking into that courthouse carrying 3 boxes of evidence, I spotted Karen across the hallway with her expensive suit and confident smirk. She thought she was fighting a scared electrician. She had no idea she was about to face a federal discrimination case. The courtroom felt like a freezer, but sweat still dripped down my back as Judge Patricia Morrison reviewed the case files. Karen sat ramrod straight beside her attorney, radiating the confidence of someone who'd never lost a legal fight to a blue-collar worker. She was about to learn that confidence and competence aren't the same thing. Your Honor, Karen's attorney began, Mr. Hendricks has willfully violated community covenants for 18 months. The HOA has shown remarkable patience, but continued defiance threatens neighborhood stability. Remarkable patience. I almost laughed out loud. Then it was Sarah Martinez's turn. She stood slowly like a gunslinger in an old western and dropped the first bombshell. Your Honor, we're filing a federal fair housing counterclaim. The evidence shows systematic discrimination targeting minority and working-class residents. Sarah opened my first evidence box. We have documented proof of selective enforcement spanning 5 years. Judge Morrison's eyebrows shot up. Karen's attorney went pale. This wasn't supposed to be about discrimination. This was supposed to be a simple HOA foreclosure. But the real earthquake came when Sarah presented Janet Bennett's email folder. Your Honor, we have internal HOA communications explicitly discussing targeting strategies based on residents' economic status and likelihood to mount legal defense. She read Karen's email aloud. Target renters and blue-collar types first. They're less likely to have legal resources. The courtroom went dead silent. Even the court reporter stopped typing for a moment. Judge Morrison leaned forward, her expression shifting from bored routine to sharp attention. Karen's face cycled through confusion, panic, then something approaching rage. She leaned over to whisper furiously at her attorney, but the damage was spreading like electrical fire through dry insulation. Your Honor, Sarah continued, 47 houses in Willowbrook Estates have identical window installations. 0 violations for residents connected to the HOA president. 100% enforcement against minority and working-class homeowners. Judge Morrison called a 30-minute recess. Karen's attorney spent those 30 minutes on his phone, probably calling his malpractice insurance carrier. When court resumed, the judge's tone had completely changed. This court is deeply troubled by allegations of discriminatory enforcement. Mr. Hendricks, your foreclosure case is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, I'm ordering a complete investigation of HOA practices and referring this matter to the federal prosecutor's office. Karen's world crumbled in real time. The confident smirk melted into something resembling panic as she realized this wasn't just about my house anymore. Federal prosecutors meant criminal charges. Criminal charges meant prison time. Walking out of that courthouse felt like the first sunny day after a year-long storm. But Karen wasn't finished. Desperate people do desperate things. The harassment escalated immediately. Anonymous complaints flooded the city about my unlicensed electrical work at home. Code enforcement showed up 3 times in 2 weeks, finding nothing but costing me lost work time for mandatory inspections. Someone, I couldn't prove it was Karen, but come on, reported my truck for commercial vehicle violations in a residential zone. Parking tickets appeared like magic, even when I was parked legally. Then came the phone calls, heavy breathing, hang-ups, threats mumbled in disguised voices. Drop the lawsuit or you'll regret it. Classic intimidation tactics that might have worked on someone without 3 boxes of federal evidence. The breaking point came when Emma called me crying from school. Someone had contacted her guidance counselor with concerns about her home environment and possible neglect due to father's legal troubles. They'd dragged my 16-year-old daughter into their war. That night, I sat in my evidence room staring at 5 years' worth of Karen's documented abuse. Phone records, emails, violation patterns, financial manipulation. She'd been running Willowbrook Estates like her personal kingdom, driving out anyone who didn't fit her vision of proper residence. But buried in those records, I found something that changed everything. Property tax records showed Karen owned 3 rental houses in Willowbrook through an LLC called KW Holdings. Houses she'd never disclosed to the HOA board despite clear conflict of interest requirements. Houses that had identical window violations she'd ignored for her own financial benefit. One of those rental properties had the exact same windows I'd been fined for. Not similar, identical. Same manufacturer, same style, installed by the same contractor. Karen hadn't just been discriminating against working-class residents. She'd been manipulating property values to benefit her real estate investment portfolio. The scope of her corruption was breathtaking. Selective enforcement drove down property values, creating buying opportunities for her investment LLC. She'd been systematically gaming the housing market using HOA authority as her weapon. I called Sarah Martinez at home. I found it, the smoking gun that connects everything. What did you find? Karen owns rental property in the neighborhood. Property with the exact windows she's been fining other people for installing. Sarah's silence stretched for a long moment. Then, Marcus, you just turned this from a discrimination case into a federal RICO investigation. Karen's been running a criminal enterprise. Karen Whitmore thought she was fighting a simple electrician over some windows. She had no idea she'd just awakened a federal task force. 3 weeks after the federal referral, I was sitting in my evidence room at midnight when the pieces finally clicked into place. Sometimes the biggest discoveries happen when you're not looking for them, like finding a short circuit in the last place you'd think to check. I'd been digging through 5 years of county property records, cross-referencing HOA board decisions with real estate transactions. The smell of burnt coffee filled the room as my printer worked overtime, spitting out deed transfers and tax assessments. That's when I found the shell company. KW Holdings LLC, registered in Delaware, had purchased 3 properties in Willowbrook Estates over the past 4 years. The registered agent was listed as Kevin Whitmore, Karen's husband. But the real shocker was the timing of these purchases. Every single property had been bought within 6 months of receiving major HOA violations. The Martinez house on Oak Street, Carlos got hammered with window fines, deck violations, and landscaping citations. The stress drove his family to sell below market value. KW Holdings swooped in with a cash offer 20% under asking price. The Thompson rental on Pine Street, elderly couple got cited for fence height, shed placement, and excessive holiday decorations. After 18 months of escalating fines, they sold to avoid foreclosure. Again, KW Holdings bought at a massive discount. The Bennett property next to Janet, her late husband's tools in the garage, supposedly violated residential use standards. The harassment continued until Janet's daughter convinced her to sell and move to assisted living. Guess who bought it? My hands actually shook as I traced the money trail. Karen hadn't just been discriminating against working-class residents. She'd been systematically terrorizing homeowners to create investment opportunities for her family's real estate empire. But the smoking gun was sitting right there in the property files. 2847 Maple Street, purchased by KW Holdings 18 months ago for $43,000 below market value. According to the listing photos, this house had the exact same vinyl windows I'd been fined for. Not similar windows. Identical. Same manufacturer, same color, same grid pattern, installed by the same contractor. Karen had been collecting rent on a property with the illegal windows she was trying to foreclose on me for installing. The violation records told the whole story. The previous owners, an elderly couple named the Patels, had received their first window citation 3 years ago. The fines escalated monthly, $500, $1,000, $2,000, until they faced foreclosure. Rather than lose everything, they sold to the first cash buyer, KW Holdings. Karen's signature was on every violation notice, every fine escalation, every board decision that drove the Patels into financial panic. Then I found the insurance records that made my blood boil. KW Holdings had filed a homeowner's insurance claim for storm damage to those same windows 6 months after purchase. They'd collected $8,000 for replacing windows that supposedly violated HOA standards. Karen had been running a protection racket disguised as community standards enforcement. The scope was staggering. Over 4 years, KW Holdings had acquired properties worth $400,000 at 60 cents on the dollar, a profit of $160,000 through systematic HOA harassment. Every targeted homeowner fit the same profile: elderly, minority, working class, or rental properties. People without resources to fight extended legal battles. People who would sell cheap rather than face foreclosure. I cross-referenced Karen's real estate license with the property sales. She'd been the listing agent on 2 of the distressed sales, collecting commission on properties her HOA harassment had devalued, double-dipping on her own corruption. But the most damning evidence was an email I found in the county's electronic filing system. Karen had submitted a complaint about declining property values due to non-conforming improvements the same month her LLC bought the Martinez house. She'd literally cited her own discrimination as justification for below-market property acquisition. Federal investigators love patterns, and Karen had gifted them a 5-year timeline of criminal enterprise: conspiracy, mail fraud, wire fraud, housing discrimination, racketeering. She'd violated enough federal laws to run a small prison. I called Sarah Martinez at 6 a.m., knowing she'd want to hear this immediately. Sarah, I found the mother lode. Karen's been running a real estate scam using HOA authority. We're not just talking discrimination anymore. What are we talking about? Criminal conspiracy spanning 5 years and $500,000 in fraudulent property manipulation. Karen thought she was collecting rent checks. She was actually collecting federal evidence. The morning after my discovery, Sarah Martinez called an emergency meeting. Her law office conference room smelled like fresh coffee and impending justice as she spread my property research across a table that had probably seen its share of David versus Goliath battles. Marcus, what you've uncovered isn't just HOA abuse, it's organized crime. Sarah's eyes gleamed with the intensity of a prosecutor who'd found her white whale. Karen's been running a systematic racketeering operation using municipal authority as her weapon. Within hours, she'd assembled what looked like a legal SWAT team. Rebecca Bennett, a forensic accountant who specialized in financial fraud. David Rodriguez, a federal housing discrimination expert. And the big gun, Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Walsh, who prosecuted public corruption cases for the Southern District of Ohio. The strategy session felt like watching a master electrician plan a complex rewiring job. Every connection mapped, every circuit traced, every potential failure point identified. Here's how we dismantle Karen's operation, Sarah explained, pointing to a timeline that now covered an entire wall. Federal RICO charges require proving a pattern of criminal activity. We have 5 years of systematic property manipulation. That's our pattern. Rebecca, the forensic accountant, had been analyzing KW Holdings' financial records with the enthusiasm of someone who lived for spreadsheet detective work. The money trail is beautiful in its stupidity, she announced. Karen and Kevin use the same bank account for HOA fees and rental property purchases. Every property acquisition directly correlates with HOA enforcement actions. But we needed more than financial records. We needed victims willing to testify, and that meant tracking down people Karen had driven away. Janet Bennett became our secret weapon. Despite being 73 and terrified of Karen's retaliation, she'd kept detailed records of every neighborhood harassment campaign. More importantly, she'd maintained friendships with families who'd fled Willowbrook. The Patels moved to Toledo after Karen destroyed them, Janet whispered during one of our kitchen table strategy sessions. Maria Santos went back to Puerto Rico. The Johnson family relocated to Kentucky. But they all kept documentation because they knew something wasn't right. I spent the next week playing detective, tracking down former neighbors across 3 states. Each phone call revealed the same pattern: systematic harassment followed by forced sale to KW Holdings. The Patels wept when I explained that their harassment hadn't been random bad luck but calculated criminal targeting. We lost everything, Mr. Patel told me over a scratchy phone connection. 40 years building equity gone because we couldn't afford lawyers to fight fake violations. David Rodriguez, our housing expert, was building the federal discrimination case with methodical precision. He'd analyzed demographics of every HOA enforcement action going back 8 years. The statistics were damning. 93% of major violations targeted minority or working-class families, 0 enforcement against country club members or real estate professionals. Karen didn't just discriminate, David explained. She weaponized discrimination for profit. That elevates this from civil rights violation to criminal conspiracy. Meanwhile, Assistant U.S. Attorney Walsh was coordinating with FBI Financial Crimes Unit. Turns out Karen's operation had triggered multiple federal databases. Wire fraud alerts from suspicious property transfers, mail fraud flags from HOA violation notices, banking irregularities from cash transactions exceeding reporting thresholds. She's been on our radar for 6 months, Walsh admitted. Your case provides the missing piece, proof of criminal intent and systematic operation. The evidence organization took over my entire garage. 3 long tables covered with chronological timelines, property records, financial transactions, and victim testimonies. It looked like a crime lab, complete with red string connecting related incidents. Emma helped after school, her teenage attention to detail perfect for cross-referencing dates and dollar amounts. Dad, Karen's like a really evil landlord who creates her own distressed properties, she observed while highlighting bank transfers. That's exactly what she is, sweetheart. But the most satisfying moment came when we tracked down Karen's real estate license history. Turns out she'd faced disciplinary action in 2018 for undisclosed conflicts of interest, selling property to her own relatives without proper disclosure. The Real Estate Commission had suspended her license for 6 months. Karen was a repeat offender who'd learned to hide her schemes better. Sarah was preparing a lawsuit that read like a Tom Clancy thriller. Federal RICO charges, mail fraud, wire fraud, housing discrimination, conspiracy, tax evasion, and about 12 other felonies I couldn't pronounce. The damage calculations alone ran to 6 figures. "We're not just seeking compensation for you," Sarah explained. "We're dismantling an 8-year criminal enterprise and establishing precedent for HOA accountability nationwide." The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Present. Karen with irrefutable evidence of her criminal operation. Offer one chance for settlement before federal prosecutors filed charges. Let her choose between paying massive damages or facing 20 years in federal prison. Assistant U.S. Attorney Walsh smiled when Sarah outlined our strategy. "I love cases where the defendant documented their own crimes. Karen's been building our prosecution case for 5 years." 3 months of investigation had revealed the truth. Karen Whitmore wasn't just a neighborhood bully. She was the head of a criminal organization that happened to masquerade as an HOA. Karen's desperation manifested like a short circuit, throwing sparks in all directions. The morning after news broke about the federal investigation, I found a private investigator parked outside my house, some sleazy guy in a rusted Camry taking photos of Emma getting on the school bus. That crossed every line I had. I walked straight to his car window, my work boots crunching on gravel loud enough to wake the dead. "You want to explain why you're photographing my 16-year-old daughter?" The PI rolled down his window, cigarette smoke billowing out like guilty conscience. "Just doing a job, pal. Public street, public photography." "Whose job?" He smirked and drove off without answering. But I didn't need confirmation. Karen was playing private investigator games now, digging for dirt that didn't exist. By noon, the harassment campaign was in full swing. The PI had visited 3 neighbors, asking about my fitness as a parent and whether Emma seemed neglected due to her father's legal troubles. Janet Bennett called immediately. "Marcus, some awful man was asking if you drink too much, if you have strange visitors, if Emma looks properly fed and clothed." Janet's voice shook with indignation. "I told him to get off my property before I called police." Karen's strategy was transparent. If you can't win on facts, destroy your opponent's reputation. But she'd underestimated Willowbrook's transformation. The neighbors she'd terrorized for years had found their backbone. Mrs. Patterson from Elm Street, the bank president's wife, called that evening. "Marcus, that investigator tried to pump me for information about your character. I told him you're the best neighbor we've ever had, and if he came back, my husband would have bank security escort him off the property." Even more satisfying was the call from Carlos Martinez. "Hey man, some PI was asking about you. I told him you helped me fix my electrical panel for free last winter, and anyone messing with you was messing with the whole neighborhood." The community Karen had spent years dividing was uniting against her. But Karen wasn't finished with her bag of dirty tricks. Wednesday morning brought a visit from Child Protective Services. A well-meaning social worker named Mrs. Henderson stood on my doorstep with a clipboard and genuine concern. "Mr. Hendricks, we received an anonymous report about possible neglect. Someone claimed your daughter appears malnourished and your home environment is unstable due to ongoing legal issues." I invited her in for coffee and showed her my evidence room, now transformed into a federal case command center. Mrs. Henderson's eyes widened as she took in the organized timeline, professional legal documents, and systematic approach to fighting corruption. "Sir, whoever reported this was either misinformed or malicious. Your home shows clear evidence of a devoted parent fighting for his family's rights." She closed her notepad. "Case dismissed, and between you and me, keep fighting the good fight." Karen's attacks were backfiring spectacularly. Thursday brought the financial warfare. Someone, again, couldn't prove it, but come on, reported my electrical business to the state licensing board for operating without proper credentials and performing unsafe work in residential areas. The inspector who showed up was a guy named Pete Kowalski, 20-year veteran who'd seen every scam in the book. He spent an hour reviewing my license, insurance, work permits, and customer references. "Marcus, your paperwork's cleaner than most contractors I inspect. Someone's playing games with you." Pete shook his head. "I'm noting this as a frivolous complaint filed with malicious intent. That goes on the record." By Friday, Karen's desperation reached peak stupidity. She attempted to have my work truck towed from my own driveway, claiming it violated residential parking ordinances. The towing company called me for confirmation before hooking up. "Sir, we've got a woman here demanding we tow your vehicle, but you're parked legally on your own property. She seems pretty agitated. You want us to call police?" "Yes, please do." 20 minutes later, Officer Janet Rodriguez, no relation to our housing expert, was writing Karen a citation for filing false reports and harassment. Watching Karen try to explain her actions to a uniformed police officer while neighbors gathered on their porches was the most entertainment Willowbrook had seen in years. Ma'am, this is your third complaint this week involving Mr. Hendricks. I'm recommending you seek legal counsel about harassment laws before this escalates further. That evening, Sarah Martinez called with an update that made my week. Karen's attorney has been contacting our office daily asking about settlement discussions. They know the federal case is airtight. What are they offering? Started at $10,000. Now they're at $50,000 plus her resignation from all HOA positions. Sarah's satisfaction was audible. Karen's hemorrhaging money on legal fees and private investigators while her case gets weaker by the hour. But the most telling sign of Karen's panic came Sunday morning. Emma spotted her driving slowly past our house at dawn, staring at the federal evidence warning signs Sarah had posted in our windows. Dad, she looks scared. Karen Whitmore should be scared. She'd spent 8 years terrorizing neighbors with impunity. Now she was discovering what it felt like to be the target. Karen's final gambit arrived on a Tuesday morning that started normal and ended with police sirens. I was having coffee when Officer Rodriguez knocked on my door, her expression apologetic but official. Marcus, I hate to do this, but Karen Whitmore filed a restraining order petition claiming you've been stalking and threatening her. Judge Patterson wants to see you in chambers at 2 p.m. Stalking? The woman who'd hired a PI to photograph my daughter was claiming I was stalking her? Officer Rodriguez, I've got security cameras covering my entire property. Want to see 8 weeks of footage proving I haven't been anywhere near Karen's house? Save it for the judge. But between us, her story has more holes than Swiss cheese. At the courthouse, Karen sat beside a new attorney, her fourth one since this started. She'd clearly spent money on appearance coaching because the confident real estate queen had been replaced by a trembling victim in conservative clothing and minimal makeup. Your Honor, her attorney began, my client has endured months of harassment from Mr. Hendricks. He's been photographing her property, following her to work, and making threatening phone calls. Judge Patterson looked skeptical. Do you have evidence of these activities? Well, Your Honor, my client fears for her safety based on his aggressive behavior and the federal investigation he initiated. Sarah Martinez stood slowly, her briefcase clicking open like a gunshot. Your Honor, we have comprehensive evidence proving these allegations are fabricated. Security footage, phone records, GPS data from Mr. Hendricks' work vehicle, and witness statements. She handed the judge a thumb drive. Everything is time-stamped and verified. During the alleged stalking incidents, Mr. Hendricks was either at work sites 20 miles away or at home with his daughter. Judge Patterson reviewed the evidence for 15 minutes while Karen's face cycled through various shades of panic. Finally, he looked up with the expression of someone who'd seen too many frivolous lawsuits. Miss Whitmore, filing false police reports is a crime. Your petition is denied, and I'm recommending the prosecutor's office review your complaint for possible perjury charges. Karen's attorney whispered frantically in her ear, but the damage was spreading like electrical fire through wet insulation. Walking out of that courthouse, I felt like I'd dodged a bullet. But desperate people with nothing left to lose become dangerous in unpredictable ways. The escalation came that same evening. Emma called me at work, her voice tight with controlled fear. Dad, someone broke into our house. Nothing stolen, but all your evidence boxes are torn apart, papers everywhere. I broke every speed limit getting home. The evidence room looked like a tornado had hit it, documents scattered, photos torn from walls, computer equipment smashed. But whoever did this wasn't a professional burglar. They'd missed the backup drives hidden in my bedroom closet and the duplicate files stored at Sarah's office. Officer Rodriguez arrived within minutes of my call, her flashlight cutting through the chaos. This wasn't random vandalism. Someone was looking for specific documents. She photographed the destruction. Any idea who might want to destroy evidence in a federal case? Just one person, desperate enough to risk felony breaking and entering. But Karen had made her biggest mistake yet. In her panic to destroy evidence, she'd left behind evidence of evidence destruction. Federal prosecutors love obstruction of justice charges. They're easy to prove and carry serious prison time. The next morning brought Karen's most pathetic attempt at intimidation. A process server delivered papers claiming KW Holdings was suing me for defamation and business interference. They wanted $200,000 in damages for false accusations harming their real estate investments. Sarah Martinez laughed when I showed her the lawsuit. Marcus, this is beautiful. Karen's admitting under oath that she owns KW Holdings and that our federal investigation is harming her business. She just confessed to the criminal conspiracy we've been proving. How is that helpful? Because federal prosecutors can now use her own lawsuit as evidence of criminal intent. She's literally suing us for exposing her crimes. But the final straw came Thursday evening. Emma was studying at the kitchen table when someone threw a brick through our front window. Attached was a note in block letters: "Drop the lawsuit or lose more than windows." That crossed from harassment into terrorism. I called 911, then Sarah, then Assistant U.S. Attorney Walsh. Within an hour, FBI agents were processing the crime scene while neighbors gathered to offer support. Mrs. Patterson brought Emma hot chocolate. Carlos Martinez offered to install security cameras. Janet Bennett stood guard with a rolling pin like a 73-year-old bodyguard. "Mr. Hendricks," FBI agent Sarah Kim said while photographing the brick, "we're treating this as witness intimidation in a federal case. That's a separate felony carrying up to 20 years. Karen had just graduated from HOA corruption to federal terrorism charges. The next morning, Agent Kim called with news that made my entire year. We arrested Karen Whitmore at 6 a.m. Federal charges: racketeering, mail fraud, wire fraud, housing discrimination, obstruction of justice, and witness intimidation. What's she looking at? 40 years in federal prison if convicted on all counts. Karen Whitmore had finally met an authority figure she couldn't intimidate: the United States Department of Justice. The emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. on a Thursday that felt like Christmas morning, and Judgment Day rolled into one. Word had spread through Willowbrook faster than gossip at a church potluck. Karen Whitmore's federal arrest had made the evening news, and everyone wanted front-row seats for the finale. I arrived at the community center 30 minutes early to find the parking lot already packed. Cars lined the street for 3 blocks, and I spotted license plates from neighboring counties. This wasn't just a Willowbrook event anymore, this was regional entertainment. The community center buzzed with an energy I'd never felt before. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with anticipation as neighbors who'd barely spoken in years clustered together, sharing Karen horror stories like war veterans comparing battle scars. "Marcus!" Janet Bennett waved me over to the front row, where she'd saved seats like we were attending a Broadway show. "Channel 6 is here, and that reporter from the Columbus Dispatch. Even the county commissioner came." Sarah Martinez arrived carrying a leather briefcase and the satisfied expression of someone about to deliver professional justice. She set up at the presenter's table while photographers positioned themselves for optimal shots. At exactly 7 p.m., the remaining HOA board members filed in looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Board Secretary Helen Morrison, no relation to Judge Patterson, called the meeting to order with a voice that shook like autumn leaves. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're here tonight to address recent developments regarding former HOA President Karen Whitmore." The crowd fell silent except for camera shutters clicking like mechanical insects. Due to criminal charges filed by federal prosecutors, Karen Whitmore has resigned all HOA positions effective immediately. Helen's prepared statement rattled in her hands. The board extends apologies to any residents who experienced inappropriate enforcement actions. Inappropriate enforcement actions. Even now they couldn't say the word discrimination. Sarah Martinez stood, her heels clicking across the linoleum like a countdown timer. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here tonight representing not just Marcus Hendricks, but every family Karen Whitmore targeted over the past 8 years. She opened her briefcase with theatrical precision, pulling out a settlement check that seemed to glow under the fluorescent lights. Karen Whitmore's criminal enterprise has been dismantled by federal authorities. Tonight, we're here to announce the terms of her civil settlement." The crowd leaned forward collectively, the silence so complete you could hear the building's heating system cycling on. $75,000 in damages to Marcus Hendricks for harassment, discrimination, and attempted theft of property through fraudulent HOA enforcement. Applause erupted like a dam bursting. Emma, sitting beside Janet, clapped so hard her hands probably hurt. Even the news cameras captured neighbors hugging and cheering like their team had won the Super Bowl. But Sarah wasn't finished. Additionally, Karen Whitmore is permanently banned from any HOA leadership position in Ohio. KW Holdings LLC has been dissolved, with all illegally acquired properties returned to fair market value through court-supervised sales. More applause, but Sarah raised her hand for silence. Most importantly, this case has established legal precedent for HOA accountability. No board member in Ohio can ever again use community authority for personal financial gain without facing federal prosecution. That's when I stood up, my work boots loud on the floor as I walked to the microphone. The room fell silent again, but this time it felt different, respectful, supportive. 8 months ago, I thought I was fighting one woman over some windows. Tonight I realized we were fighting for something much bigger. I looked around the packed room, seeing faces that had transformed from fearful to empowered. We proved that ordinary people can defeat corruption when they document everything, build community support, and refuse to back down. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. Even the county commissioner applauded, probably calculating how this precedent would protect his own constituents. Channel 6's reporter approached afterward, her cameraman capturing the check presentation. "Mr. Hendricks, what's your message for other homeowners facing HOA abuse? Document everything, build alliances. And remember, bullies count on you staying isolated and afraid. When communities unite, corruption crumbles." The celebration continued in the parking lot, neighbors planning the first annual Freedom from Harassment Day festival. Carlos Martinez announced he was running for HOA president on a platform of transparent governance. Mrs. Patterson offered to host a legal rights workshop in her backyard, but the sweetest moment came when Emma hugged me beside my truck, her voice muffled against my shoulder. "Dad, I'm proud of you. You didn't just fight for our house, you fought for everyone." Looking around at neighbors who were laughing instead of hiding, planning instead of fearing, I realized Emma was right. This hadn't been about windows or violations or even $75,000. This had been about proving that in America, justice isn't just for people who can afford expensive lawyers. Sometimes justice is for electricians with measuring tapes, elderly neighbors with manila folders, and teenagers who believe their fathers can change the world. Karen Whitmore had spent 8 years teaching our neighborhood to be afraid. We'd just taught her that fear works both ways. 6 months later, I'm standing in my backyard watching Emma practice her college application presentation, the same windows that started this whole mess sparkling in the afternoon sunlight. The settlement money transformed more than just my bank account. It transformed an entire community. The Willowbrook Estates Scholarship Fund, established with $25,000 from the settlement, awarded its first grants last month. Emma won $500 for her essay about standing up to injustice, which she'll use toward her pre-law program at Ohio State University. Turns out watching your father fight corruption makes quite an impression on a teenager's career goals. "Dad, listen to this part," Emma calls out, reading from her laptop. "My father taught me that documentation beats intimidation, community beats corruption, and ordinary people can create extraordinary change when they refuse to stay silent." Pride swells in my chest like good voltage flowing through clean wiring. The playground improvements, funded by $15,000 in settlement money, opened last week with a ribbon-cutting ceremony that drew 300 residents. Children who'd spent years tiptoeing around Karen's violation threats now swing freely while their parents organize movie nights and block parties without fear of retribution. Carlos Martinez won the HOA presidency by a landslide, running on a platform of transparent governance and equal enforcement. His first act was implementing monthly financial reporting and requiring board member conflict of interest disclosures. The second was commissioning a bronze plaque for the community center, in honor of those who stand against corruption. Janet Bennett leads garden tours now, proudly displaying the gnomes that Karen once banned. "Marcus taught us that standing up to bullies isn't just about yourself," she tells visitors. "It's about protecting the next person who might get targeted." The Legal Defense Fund, seeded with $10,000 from my settlement, has already helped 3 families in neighboring counties fight HOA abuse. Sarah Martinez jokes that my case created a cottage industry in HOA accountability law. Other attorneys across Ohio now reference Hendricks' precedent when fighting discriminatory enforcement. Karen's aftermath reads like a cautionary tale written by federal prosecutors. She plea bargained to avoid trial, receiving 3 years in federal prison plus 5 years supervised probation. Her real estate license was permanently revoked, KW Holdings dissolved, and all illegally acquired properties sold at court-supervised auctions. The Patel family used restitution money to buy back their original house, which had sat empty since Karen's arrest. Mr. Patel called me last week, his voice thick with emotion. "Marcus, we never thought we'd see justice. Thank you for fighting when we couldn't." Ohio House Bill 247, the HOA Transparency Act, passed the legislature in March with unanimous bipartisan support. The law requires conflict disclosure, limits foreclosure authority, and establishes tenant rights for rentals in HOA communities. I testified at the bill signing, sitting beside Governor Richardson, as he signed legislation that will protect thousands of families from future Karen Whitmores. My electrician business has tripled, partly because homeowners throughout central Ohio want to hire the guy who took down the corrupt HOA, but mostly because word spreads when you help neighbors fix problems instead of creating them. The annual Willowbrook Freedom Festival happens next month, featuring live music, food trucks, and booths where residents share HOA reform resources. Emma's organizing a voter registration drive because she learned that civic engagement beats passive compliance every single time. My evidence room has become a local museum of sorts. Neighbors bring their kids to see the timeline and documents that dismantled an 8-year reign of terror. This is what happens when good people document bad behavior, I tell them. But the sweetest victory is the simplest one. Last weekend, a young couple with 2 small children bought the house where the Martinez family once lived in fear. They knocked on my door asking about the neighborhood, and I could honestly tell them, this is a community where people look out for each other. That's what we built from the ashes of Karen's corruption. A real community. The website HOA Abuse Survivors gets 50,000 visitors monthly now, downloading template documents and legal resources. My story has inspired similar fights across the country, proving that one person's courage multiplies exponentially when others follow the example. If you've survived HOA harassment, drop your story in the comments below. Share this video with anyone facing neighborhood bullies. Your engagement helps other victims find hope and resources. Hit subscribe for more David versus Goliath victories, because sometimes the little guy wins when he's armed with patience, documentation, and an entire community that refuses to stay silent. Remember, bullies count on isolation. Communities create accountability, and sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to be afraid. Justice tastes even sweeter when it's shared with neighbors who've become family.
From all of us here at HOA Stories, thanks so much for watching today's HOA Karen Meltdown. If you enjoyed seeing neighbors stand their ground and karma catch up, smash that like button, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe so you won't miss the next HOA drama we bring you.